So did y'all know that I am an agent of white supremacy? Yeah. So now 2 times I have been declared an agent of white supremacy. First, I was declared an agent of white supremacy by the Hebrew Israelites. And I'm not saying all of them, but many Hebrew Israelites who have come to my videos about the Hebrew Israelites have decided that I was an agent of white supremacy. So now, because of a video I did and I spoke gently, very shallow about the growing sect of black people claiming to be indigenous to America, that they have no African roots. Now, again, I'm an agent of white supremacy. Well, we're going to break down this oxymoron if you listen to any of the other videos I talk about. We're not going to go deep over your head, but we're going to go 3 feet high and rising. So let's get this done. Let's trek with me. So what's up, everybody? How you doing? This is your Coach Renz, and I want to first thank everybody who is visiting this channel for the very first time, everybody who is a patron and subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate it. You know, if you really want to support the channel, continue to be a patron, order from Uncle Renz Popcorn, or find one of my coaching programs on CoachRenz.com that will better your life and support. It's all in support of this channel and my other channel, Coach Renz. Go and join the Coach Renz channel. That's going to be that channel is purely about coaching and growing energetically, growing physically, financially, economically. Well, the financial, economic, same thing, but different. Economically in the world stage, financially in your personal. So join those pages. Let's link up. Let's keep moving forward. Let's keep building. So, your Coach Renz is an agent, again, of white supremacy, of pushing an agenda that continues the white supremacy that is overwhelming the world right now, overwhelming the world over the last 3,000, 4,000 years, that I am an agent of that because I disagree with the Hebrew Israelites, but now because I disagree with the we ain't African, we native to America, we indigenous people in America movement. Now, I find this very odd. I find this very odd. And first, let's go ahead and let me give you the hardcore answer right now. And why I say this is an oxymoron. Can a brother who constantly gets on his videos and talks about moving back to Africa, who constantly talks about taking the knowledge base of black people who have grown up in Western cultures in what's called a first world nation, to take our knowledge, to take our access, to take our funding and go to the most resourceful place on the planet, Africa, to go to nations like Rwanda, Botswana, South Africa, Ghana, Senegal, to go to these countries where they are growing and growing and growing, to go there and combine our knowledge base, our connections, our influence with their resources and their people and their knowledge and their education and their influence, to combine and build a nation that is controlled by black people, that have black people's interests at heart first. To go there. Instead of letting China continue to be the main player of financial development in places like Rwanda and Botswana, and for us to be a part of that, to start trading with these nations, to trade with our Afro-Latino, Afro-South American, Afro-Central American brothers, to begin developing a relationship. Maybe you don't go all the way over there, but you go to Haiti, you go to Bahia, you go to Colombia, and you start working with the resources of the people there to build up those people. Like, think about it. In Colombia, there are areas, there are city states where 92%, and I say city state, but it's like a whole state within, 92% of the people claim their African heritage. Bahia, Brazil, 98, I believe, % of the people claim their African heritage. All over Central, Caribbean, Latin America, they claim their African culture. They embrace it. But yet, here in America, we are told there's a movement. You ain't African. Don't claim African. You a Hebrew. Don't claim African. You a native. You a native. You an American. You an American. You indigenous people. Further continuing the separation. Let me tell you the scam on that. I'm going to go ahead and just get to the hearts of some of this. Let's break down the scam on that. What's the geopolitical scam of all of that? You see, back in the day, after slavery, no, let's go before slavery. We know that America is built on the backs of slaves. We know that all the Americas was built on the back of slaves, but especially this North American continent built on the backs of slaves. That the American economy could have never prospered without slaves. Haiti would have never been the jewel of the Caribbean without the slaves. That Brazil would have never been what it became without the slaves. And then after slavery, Jim Crow and other things put in process, the economic spending power of the African in America bolstered the American economy, kept the American economy. Without it, the American economy does not continue to grow. If a city like Atlanta, if black people decided that they were not going to participate with any business that was not owned by, ran by a black person, then the majority of major businesses in Atlanta will crumble. If black people stop riding MARTA, MARTA ceases. That's our mass transit system. If we stop purchasing from many of the different companies, those companies die. We stop going to Waffle House. Waffle House is done in the Atlanta market. And they notice worldwide, I mean not worldwide, nationwide, the 27, 30 million black people in America, if they start to truly develop Pan-Africanism or just building within their own communities, then you're talking about major cities that will be financially crippled. Atlanta, financially crippled. DC, financially crippled. Many of the boroughs in New York, financially crippled. Detroit, financially crippled. Chicago, financially crippled. Dallas, financially crippled. Many of these cities, financially crippled. LA becomes financially crippled. You take that away. You take those economics away and they become financially crippled. Now, if those cities become financially crippled in America, then America will become financially crippled. So it is vital that the black people in America stay American. So after slavery, when Marcus Garvey started his movement, they broke the ships. They made sure that it wasn't something that could grow, because if the black people left America during that time frame, there is no reconstruction of the South at that time frame. There is no growth and expansion out west during that time frame. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. The black people have to remain in America. But they must remain in America, but be separated from Africa. But what you don't get for those who claim an indigenous, they realize they had to separate you from the indigenous as well. This is why you will never get your land concessions by claiming your indigenous heritage. You will never get your casinos by claiming indigenous heritage. It's not going to happen. Let me give you a little breakdown. And although I'm just going 3 feet high and rising, I can't take you to the deep end. Not yet. Maybe a different video, but not yet. But when I was in the Marine Corps and I was stationed down in Tampa, Florida, because I seemed to be in units where studying military history was very vital, and it was good learning anyway, just for us leadership and how the world works. But living in Tampa, Florida, if you ever lived in Florida, you will study the Seminole Wars. We went to the areas, we went into the trips to visit to see how the Seminole Wars were fought and the areas they were fought. We went and studied all this stuff about the Seminole Wars. Well, let me tell you something that they didn't want to tell you. Because for 3 years, the Seminole Indians, while Florida wasn't part of America yet, still owned by Spain, these Seminole Indians held off America. And even when America bought Florida, they held off America for 3 years. For 3 years, they held off America. One of the most vital and most instrumental ways that they was able to hold off America, the American military, a full 2/3 of the American military was dedicated at that time frame to trying to fight and stop the Seminole Indians. Here's the thing that my indigenous people misconstrue or completely ignore. And this was common throughout what is America today. Very common. During the time frame when Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi were part of the Union, Florida was part of Spain. All slaves who ran away, African slaves who ran away, did not run north. Many by the hundreds went south. They were welcomed by the Seminole Indian. The Seminole Indian tribe welcomed them. And they made them part of the tribe. They intermarried with the Seminole Indians. They then utilized the farming techniques that they had learned from the cotton fields and the rice fields and learning farming from being in South Georgia and Alabama and Mississippi and all that. They took all that and worked with the Seminole Indians to create a Seminole nation inside of Florida, to work together, to be able to fight and keep Spain at bay, but also keep America at bay later on. They intermarried. So when you post these pictures showing a black man today, and usually you grab a celebrity that looks like some Indian guy that was only like maybe 100 years ago or less, well, they intermarried. Now, just because they intermarried does not make you indigenous. Does not make you indigenous to America. It does not. It just doesn't. So, one of my cousins, he loves white women. He does. All his children are by white women. So because he intermarried and had children with white women, does that make his children indigenous to Europe? Does that make him indigenous to Europe? Now, his mama black, his daddy black. Both their ancestries come from Africa. So guess what? He is indigenous to Africa. He has had children with white women who were originally indigenous to Europe. His children are both indigenous to Europe and Africa. Now, I will say this. In our family line, we have a lot of Native Americans, Cherokee Indians, Seminole Indians, and a few other branches of Native Americans are in our family line. So, yeah, is there a small piece? But the majority of our bloodline comes from Africa. Now, another big thing. So wait a minute, before I go there. So you got to take that into consideration. Just because you intermarry, because we look like some of them look like because we had babies, and those babies over generation now look similar to those people, does not necessarily mean you're indigenous. No, it doesn't. And before I move away from that, let me add another thing. When the U.S. government, I'm gonna give you two. When the U.S. government realized that this alliance between the African in America, the former slaves, the ones who ran away, realized this. One of the first things they did is they went to the 5 civilized tribes, and I'll post up the 5 civilized tribes right here. You know, they're like the Chickasaw, the Cherokee, the Creek, but I'll post them up here because I can't remember all 5 of them right now. When they went to the 5 civilized tribes, they introduced to them slavery. They said, well, we know you've been making friends, and you brought some of these Africans into your tribes, and you've given them membership into your tribe. You're making them part of your nation. Well, we're gonna incorporate slave into your. We're gonna allow you to have slaves. We're gonna sell you slaves. We're gonna sell you some of these black people as slaves, disrupting the unity, right? The Sioux Indians were one of the last Native American groups to stop owning slaves, African slaves. 1866, go look it up. 1866, Sioux Indians, one of the last groups to stop. That slavery ended lastly with them. Almost with them. They was almost one of the last ones. But yet, you know, you're claiming this, that you're indigenous. But they use that to break up the unity. So if you're claiming that you're indigenous, then what you're saying that you are just as much a slave owner as the white man, as the European colonizer. And if you're saying that, and that's how you feel, and that's how you think, and that's what you're going to believe on some paperwork, and you really have no proof, then I guess you're not my brother. I guess you are not my brother. So when next see me, don't call me your brother. Because that's what you're saying. that you are a slave-owning North American native. Now, let's go to another point. Let's go to before I go there. Because that same government also told the Native American people that we're going to take away your tax credit for being native if you allow these Africans to claim your tribal heritage, claim native as well. We're not only going to take that away, but they also said that and go look this up, if you are a native who has African ancestry, you're not a native to America and you don't get the land concession. Go look it up. Do your research. The American government made sure to separate between the African and the native. And I know you're saying, well, that's what they were trying to do. That's what they were trying to do. Because it was real. It was real. It was easy to separate. Because you may say, go ask your grandmother what they say. Well, my grandmother said she knows how her family ran away. Her grandparents ran away from slavery and joined the Seminole Indians. And then some of her ancestors ran away from slavery and joined the Cherokee Indians, joined them in their fight against American colonialism and became part of their nation. But then later on were kicked out of their nation. Was kicked out later on because of tax reasons. Because of tax reasons. Now, we did get some land concessions in Carrollton, Georgia. I'll give you that. But we had to fight for them. They had to fight. Her parents and grandparents had to fight for that. Had to fight for it, tooth and nail, against the American government. Because they were African in America who ran to the natives and became part of their nation. That does not make them indigenous to this country. Now let's look at another instance that was very similar of breaking up that nation. So the French governor, who was fighting a war against the native people in Louisiana, I forget the name of the tribe, was fighting a battle against them and had noticed that they were being overrun and lost battles. I mean, hundreds of the French white settlers dying because these Native Americans had combined forces with freemen slaves who had became free. They called them freemen, who had became free and joined this, I think it might have been a Chickasaw, but joined this Native American tribe and wrote a letter to the American government and the French government saying that, hey, we have to do whatever is in our power to make sure that this African Indian alliance is dissolved, that it threatens the entire existence of colonial America, colonial Central America, colonial South America, colonial Caribbean, that if these relationships are allowed to continue to develop. Now, these people are claiming this native thing because of these types of situations where they see people who look on pictures that were taken after photography began, not thinking that to be native to the land of America, you have to go back into a time frame before there was photographic pictures, before the 13 million Africans who were transported from Africa to the Americas occurred. Now, yes, the overwhelming majority of those people who came over on African ships went to South America, Central America, and the Caribbean. Yes, only about 400,000, 600,000 actually came to the American colonies directly. Remember, many were sent to the Caribbean and then later sent to America, which is one of the reasons why the Hebrew Israelite thing don't even add up. You telling me that there were 13 million Hebrews in Africa, and since they sold all the Hebrews out of Africa, that the Africans sold the Hebrews out of Africa, and the colonists knew, the Europeans knew that these were the Hebrews, black people, and they sent them over to the Americas, and that you're claiming these 12 tribes, these 13 million were Jews? Are you serious? Were Hebrews? Are you serious? And then you're completely eliminating the fact that they intermarried with the people who were native here. They intermarried with the Europeans. So it's like you're trying to do the one drop of blood rule here in order to make your claim, to stake your claim. But for the people who claim that we're native to America, you're totally ignoring the 13 million people who came across into the Americas, who then proliferated over a 300-400 year period to create 30 million people in America who are of African descent, whose families did intermarry with the natives who were already here, who intermarried with the natives who was already in the Amazon, and who got with the Mayans and these other cultures, who intermarried with these groups, completely negating them. Now, even if, and we're going to go a little bit deeper, even if you went and talked about Pangea, the breaking of the continent, and that some people were on what will become America, Central America, of the side of Pangea, even if you went there and said that, here's the problem. Pangea, if that is accurate, happened 200 million years ago. 200 million years ago. The oldest humanoid fossil found in the Americas is 11,000 years old. 11,000 years old. I think the name of it is Lucia. Lucia or something like that. It's like a Spanish version of Lucy. But 11,000 years old. That there is no fossil evidence of any humanoid or what will become humans, found in the Americas that date back to a time frame of a Pangea. No. Now, is there evidence of 26,000 years ago, people migrating over the Bering Strait? Oh, wait a minute. And that Lucia skeleton is from Australia, by the way. It's an Australian. All right. It's an Aboriginal from Australia. You know, that. But 26,000 years ago, or 13,000 years ago at most recent, of an ice age of people migrating over from the Bering Strait, creating the Olmecs and the Zai people, coming across from Asia, which was formerly Chinese, which was formerly East Africans. They still come from Africa. East Africans, Ethiopia, Kush, that area, migrated into what became India and China, who then migrated over during the Bering Straits, into the Americas. Even if you took that, they still started in Africa. Still started in Africa. Even if you could prove Pangea started in Africa. No matter how you slice and dice it, we started in Africa. Now, why do they want to keep you separate? You call me an agent of white supremacy. But who's the real agent of white supremacy when they're trying to keep you from connecting to the land and the people that over the next 20 to 50 years will become the most dominant economic force on the planet? And what they're trying to do right now is trying to secure that for themselves. China has been securing it for themselves. Yes, it's great. Akon provided 80 million people in Africa with electricity. And damn near all of that is funded by China. Rwanda has one of the fastest growing economies in Africa. One of the most stable governments in Africa after all that stuff went down with the Hutu and Tutsi civil war. But they are now very stable. They are now economically growing because they shedded European socialism and they went to capitalism and allowing their own people to develop capitalism, to develop business, and now they are thriving, one of the most thriving continents. But see, the problem is you believe in that propaganda of Africa. See, they see, when I was growing up, the way they kept you separate from Africa was to fill you with propaganda, was to have the cartoons that had blackface, to have the cartoons of Africans running around with bones in their noses, to have Tarzan swinging through the jungle and 50 black men scared of this one white dude, They filled you with that type of propaganda. They told you that there was nothing but militias and poverty and thatch hutches and lions running in and eating your babies in Africa when I was growing up. So they used fear and propaganda to do that, because you know why? We didn't have worldwide news sources. We didn't have the internet. You couldn't check these things. You accepted what they told you unless you went or you met somebody who was from there. But then the world starts changing. Now we got the internet. Now we got people who are migrating all over the planet. Now there's a knowledge. Now we can look and see that Abidjan in the Ivory Coast is a beautiful landscape. That Senegal is growing and beautiful. That Rwanda's thriving. That Botswana has had 50 years of peaceful, growing, democratic government, that they have been thriving. We can see that in South Africa, that they are taking back their land that was stolen from their ancestors. We can see and we know these things now, so they cannot hide this information from us anymore. So what do? You're not from Africa. You're indigenous to America. You're not like them. They're not your people. They don't like you. They hate you. You're not part of them. You're part of America. Because we know that if 15 million of the 30 million were to leave and go and build in Botswana, go build in Bahia, go build in Haiti, go build in Ghana, and go build in the Ivory Coast and Nigeria and all these other countries, go start building in the Congo and go to South Africa. We know that if 15 million of you leave, you cripple America. You cripple America. If you start leaving England, if all the black people in England start leaving and going back to the Caribbean and going back to Africa, you cripple the British economy. Because we need your money to be spent here. We need your alliance, your allegiance to be here. We got to get that. Your money, your alliance, your allegiance. We need that to stay here in order for us to function. And while we tell you not to go there, yeah, go to Dubai and spend your money there. Go to Dubai and look how beautiful it is. Go to Qatar, see how beautiful it is. Go to Egypt, see how beautiful it is and feel connected. But don't go to Sub-Saharan Africa, no. No, and I'm not even going to talk about Gaddafi. I'm not even going to talk about that. That's a different video, that's a later. But we can't let you do that, because you do that, then you disrupt our money, our flow. So now we got to send out our agents to get you to understand that you don't belong to Africa. You're an American. You've always been an American. We made you slaves in America. Yeah, we didn't bring no slaves from Africa. We made you slaves out of the people in America. Now, how much sense does this sound like the European mindset during the whole slave, the African colonization, American colonization, and slave time frame? Is that we're going to take the indigenous people and make them slaves? No. How do we know that that was not the mindset? That's not the plan. That's not the smart thing to do. Because when you go to Africa and you study in places like Zimbabwe and you study in South Africa, you find out that the slaves in those countries, in that sub-Saharan Africa, were people from India. They went to India, brought them to Africa, and made them slaves. This is one of the reasons why there is a huge level of, there's a huge population level of Indian people, people of Indian descent in Africa. Not people who migrated later in the 1900s, but people who have been there from the 1600s and earlier, from the 14, 15, 16, 1700s. Those people were slaves in Africa. Why? Because an Indian slave in Africa cannot hide. We can find you. We can easily pick you out of the crowd. An African slave in America was easy. We can tell the difference between you and the Native American, the Indian. We can tell you the difference. As I did talk to you about on the video, when the Chinese missionaries who had became yellow in skin came to the Americas, you know, to look for the Zai people, they then intermarried with those people, which gave the native people here more of a reddish yellow tint. All right. So yeah, they could have been black, but they still came from Africa. But they look different by the time we get here. Yes, some of them were still darker skin, especially in the Caribbean, which they like to talk about how, well, Christopher Columbus first took slaves from the Americas to Europe. They were from the Caribbean. There were darker melanated people because live in the Caribbean, you over generation, darker melanation is going to be part of your adaptation. All right. So yeah, he took some. We also know that he performed genocide on those people as well. All right. So he took some people, but that doesn't mean that they didn't come from Africa first. But the plan is you bring people who don't look like these people. Because many who came over as indentured, many of the Irish and Scottish who came over as indentured servants to Europeans, once they got to America, realized that they could run away. They could leave. They could forfeit, on their debt because they can adapt. They can hide within the general population. You wouldn't know. You wouldn't know because that dude white. They all look white. All right. They can hide. They can pass. Remember passing? They can pass. All right. So, of course, they brought Africans over. But there are sunken slave ships. There are documentation. They didn't keep the documentation because they wanted black people to be able to know their heritage. But the first setup was corporations. America was first set up as a corporation. Those corporations must keep corporate documents. You got to keep catalogs of your inventory. You guys know I own Uncle Renz Popcorn. I have to have catalogs. I have to have inventory control at Uncle Renz Popcorn. So we have to know how much seed we have, how much oil we have, how much cheese we have, how much flavorings we have, how much product we've already made. We have how much butter, how much cream. We have to know all these things. I need to keep my inventory. So when you are a slave trader, you have to bring your manifest of your inventory over with your corporate papers. All right, so they kept track. That's all we know is about 13 million. They kept track. We know where they went, where they disembarked, where they sold their slaves. You had to keep track because it's business. So you had to keep track. It's business. That's how we know. That's one of the ways we know. It ain't how. It's one of the ways we know. You guys are using some superficial information. You guys are being. You're having the act of war played on you, where you divide and conquer, where you encourage disconnection amongst your your enemy, so that they're easier to conquer. As long as you keep fighting for and focusing on we're indigenous to America, you lose sight of the 20-year, 30-year plan, the 20-year, 30-year goal of elevating the power base of black people. When you elevate the power base of black people through combining with the Afro-Latin, Afro-Cuban, and African, then we one day will get rid of the term African and just go back to a Kibulan. When you go to that extent, when we get that connection, if we get that connection, then they can't kill us on the street. They can't brutalize us on the street. They can't come into our neighborhoods. If we're buying the neighborhoods and we're connected to a land, they can't come in and destroy your neighborhood and your people. The reason why they can't run up into these Asian neighborhoods is because they're still connected to Korea. They're still connected to China. They're still connected to Japan, to Laos, to Thailand, to Taiwan. They're still connected to their home countries. You can claim this is your home country, but you own nothing. And the Native Americans are not coming to your defense. They're not aligning themselves with you like they did during colonial days. They're not coming into alignment with you. So you're not going to have that power base. You're not going to be able to hold power base in America unless you build your own communities. And at least you can hold some level. But when you connect with another country that sits at the table in the UN, that sits at the table in NATO, that sits at the table in the ANC, that sits at the table in the African Union, when you connect with those countries, and you're exporting, importing, and you're visiting, you're living, you're exchanging. When you're doing that, now you have a different level of power base. That's a different level of respect. Because that's what they respect. So again, you may call me an agent of white supremacy. Behind the world can you call a black man that supports black people not being at the bottom of somebody's foot? I'm not saying that I am totally against the Hebrew Israelite message of we're going to be able to rape white women and all this kind of stuff. And white people are the devil and the Edomites and we're going to destroy the white people and all this kind of stuff. I'm totally against subjugating any people whatsoever. I think racism in all its form is evil. And for those who say that black people can't be racist, Okay, fine. Prejudice in all its forms is evil, plain and simple. And I'm not down for any version of it. Whether it's black people oppressing white people, or white people oppressing black people, Chinese people oppressing black people oppressing Asian people, it doesn't matter. Oppression in any form or fashion is oppression. And men oppressing women, it's about the dumbest damn thing I've ever seen in my life. Especially when you're oppressing women in your own group, your own woman in your own house. That's just idiocy on levels of non-understanding. But that's as deep as we're going to go on this today. I know I ranted, got a little revved up there a little bit. But I see the game that's being played. I see the game that's been played on black people in America. And as long as you allow for that game to be played, then you're never going to unravel yourself from the specter of white supremacy and be able to not only sit at the same table, but bring your own food to the table and declare what will be and what will not be at the table. And until that happens, we'll continue to suffer. And as long as you let them separate us, as long as you let them build you up to think that you ain't got to be a part of that, that you're not a part of that, you're not connected, you're disconnected. And when you see in the next 20, 30, 40 years that Africa become the beacon of world economics, and then what you going to say? You're going to be sitting there like, see what look what they did. Look what they did. They not go over there and now they not got all the resources of Africa again. They not recolonized Africa. This time they didn't colonize them physically, but they recolonized Africa economically because they got all the investments in Africa. They making all the money in Africa. Look at all these Asians, these Chinese is pulling all this money out and resources out of Africa. Denmark is pulling all these resources out of America by being their refineries. The European continent, they won't let Africa have its own currency because they got so much financial interest in Africa. They won't let Africa build its own nation because they got so much financial interest. They won't let the African nation, the 54 African nations, become a Kibulan and become one nation because they got all this financial influence. See, they trying to see what they're doing? You see what they're doing? That's white supremacy on a whole nother level again. They colonizing through financial and economic means by utilizing the government to keep black people from being able to have military might and being able to have unity in the African nations, which they know will bring unity throughout the Caribbean and the South and South America, and then the black people in America and Europe would then have a home, and then we'll have a much stronger power base. See, they colonize them again, and we fell for it. You'll be sitting up there doing all that 20, 30 years from now. That's what you'll be talking about. But right now they got you separated in your mind. And I took a knife and slit you in half. And now you don't know which way is left, which way is right. Because you focused on we indigenous to America. We ain't from Africa. Because they got their agents out there keeping you separated, playing mental warfare, mental games on you, keeping you in mental welfare. So I hope that this message resonates with you to the point where you start thinking outside of what's a popular movement motion. Yeah, it brings a level of unity that you've been missing in your life. But there's a unity that is far greater than that. Far greater than that and far better for your children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren down the line. And far better for you right now. It's not here. It's not claiming indigenous people here. And if you're going to call me an agent for saying that, I guess I'll just be your agent. But at the end of the day, it's an oxymoron. I can't be an agent for white supremacy when I'm talking about black people coming up to the same power level and we having balance. So I appreciate you guys for listening to this video. I know I went a little bit longer than I anticipated, went a little deeper than I anticipated. But we will go deeper into this conversation, breaking it down even further so I can show you that you're not indigenous to America, not in that format. And that regardless of any of it, you got to connect back to Africa, point blank, period. Our survival depends on it. Our survival depends on it. So y'all got to remember, you got to free yourself to be yourself because your greatness is non-negotiable. And watch these other videos and continue to subscribe, support the channel on Patreon, order from Uncle Renz Popcorn. Hit me up for some coaching programs and we can work together. My next video is probably going to be on financials. So look out for that one in the next today, tomorrow, the next day after. Y'all have a great day.